As we enter into a stage of political fuckery, I feel that we're doing an increasingly bad job of holding politicians to account. The problem, as I see it, is that you can only see so much brazen rule breaking by politicians before you just become numb to it. You don't expect anything to change because it just hasn't changed. We often see complicated political scandals unfold over the course of years, which certainly helps to break the shit sandwich we're being fed into manageable lumps. Stories come and go, people have their own shit to deal with, and I don't hold it against them if they don't want to spend their free time watching BBC News. I think it's probably about time we become much more familiar with those running our country. With all that being said, let's take a look at the MP for my hometown of Fareham, Suella Braverman. If that name didn't immediately send a shiver up your spine, you should probably watch this video. Suella was born in Harrow and grew up in Wembley. Here she is cosplaying as a member of the working class on one of her day trips. Mother was a nurse and later a Conservative political candidate, and Papa worked for a housing association. She went to a public primary school, then got a partial scholarship for a fancy independent school. Independent just means private school, but people think that sounds privileged, so they say independent just to make them seem more relatable. She later graduated and worked as a barrister for 10 years before being elected as Conservative MP for Fareham in 2015. Lucky us. In her career so far, she has taken a particular interest in home affairs and justice, in the same way that Hannibal Lecter took an interest in surgery and home cooking. In terms of her voting record, her notable voting history is as follows. She's generally voted for reducing corporation tax. She's pro-private schools, against climate change prevention, pro-mass surveillance, unless it means catching her sending confidential information from her personal computers, but we will get to that. She's consistently voted against gay rights. She's voted against having an elected House of Lords, voted against being a member of the EU. She's very much pro-UK military involvement overseas. And the big question, no, she does not support the legalization of recreational drugs.
Boo, you suck!
The details are in the description should you wish to take a browse, but after reading through the data, there's really nothing too surprising. In order to run through her most impactful moments as an MP, I've taken note of the wonderful Jenny Nicholson and ordered them into an internet-friendly numbered list. Number 1, the Windrush Scandal. You might remember this from a few years ago, and it has had a very recent resurgence that has been lost in the shitstorm of British politics. Here's a brief recap. The Windrush generation were a group of people that came to the UK completely legally in the years following World War II. This immigration effort was great because we could replenish our labour force and they would get to live in the UK and raise their children here. The children that once arrived here post-World War II are now pensioners. The issue is that pretty much everybody that arrived here back in the day had arrived on their parents' passport. They didn't have their own because there was zero requirement to have them, and no documents were issued to them when they arrived. Despite not having documents, they were living here once again, completely legally. Then, in 2018, in walks part Home Secretary, part Hagraven Theresa May to be a complete and total bitch. She started clamping down on immigration and went on a bit of a deportation spree. She totally forgot about the Windrush generation that helped to rebuild Britain after everybody died, and they began to get subjugated because they couldn't provide papers they were never given. Hundreds of people were deported, lost their homes, their jobs, were detained and denied medical assistance. So, how does Suella Braverman fit into all of this? Well, in March of 2020, an independent review was completed by HMICFRUS, which is acronym for the guys who investigate this stuff. They came to the obvious conclusion that the government had been a bunch of completely useless twats and gave a list of recommendations on how to make reparations to those affected. The government committed to these reparations, but have continuously under-delivered on their promises. Then, Suella added the cherry on top by repealing 3 key reparations, including giving the external inspectors more powers and appointing a commissioner to represent immigrants. 2. Breaching ministerial code. Suella was originally appointed as Home Secretary on the 6th of September 2022 and was fired on the 19th of October for breaching ministerial code. Turns out she'd been sending official emails from her personal email account. I know it doesn't sound that bad, but when you're dealing with a cache of official government documents being stored and sent from a boomer MP's iPad, you're begging for some kind of Julian Assange shit to happen. She was reappointed as Home Secretary just 6 days after being fired, as Rishi Sunak replaced Liz Truss as Prime Minister. Since then, she's been accused of breaching ministerial code once more for ignoring legal counsel with regards to an immigration detention facility being so overpopulated that somebody actually died. Number 3. The Manston facility. You may have heard reference in the news to Manston. This is a facility opened on a disused military airfield in Kent to process migrants. Migrants are only meant to stay at Manston for 24 hours for security and identity checks before being moved to longer-term accommodation, usually a hotel or something similar. The Conservative MP for the area, Sir Roger Gale, spoke out about the conditions at Manston being inhumane. Over 4,000 people were reported to be staying at the facility despite the Home Office themselves declaring it fit to 1,000 to 1,600 people. Children were forced to sleep on the floor as reports of people staying there for over a month began to surface. The accusations of the facility being unfit for human habitation was dismissed as baseless by Suella. As outbreaks of MRSA, scabies and diphtheria began to hit the facility, it ended with the death of Hussein Hasib Ahmed, a 31-year-old man from Iraq. The Home Office said that he didn't have diphtheria, but when the coroner reported that he definitely had diphtheria, the death was declared to be the subject of an investigation by the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman. When asked about the death of somebody being held at her facility, Suella was quoted as telling MPs, "I tell you who's at fault. It's very clear who's at fault. It's the fault of people who are breaking our rules, coming here illegally, exploiting vulnerable people and trying to reduce the generosity of the British people. That's who's at fault." A few things. I would assume that the generosity of the British people that petrol-bombed the detention centre in Dover had nothing to do with this sort of villainising rhetoric being spat by this useless bitch. That attack, by the way, forced the authorities to move hundreds of migrants to Manston to stop them, being murdered by terrorists. It's worth also noting that Suella was accused of blocking transfers of people out of Manston and into long-term accommodation by her own hand. This was reported by multiple sources within Parliament. Rishi Sunak has refused to comment on whether Suella received legal advice to not be a totally inhuman cow, but assures us that they're on the same page when it comes to immigration. Wow, a squirmy non-answer from Rishi Sunak? How very out of character. During a select committee hearing about why she's so shit at her job, MP Paula Barker then raised the fact that a hotel in her constituency was going to be stood up within 24 hours for use in housing asylum seekers. This would normally be great news, except for the fact that the site hasn't been a hotel for over 17 years. It was a derelict ruin. When she went back to the Home Secretary's office with nitpicky, annoying questions like, how many people will there be? Or, how long will they be staying here? Or, has there been a risk assessment? She was told that the information was complex and not readily available, and that it will take up to 72 hours to get back to her. It feels, at this point, that Rishi Sunak's choice to appoint Suella Braverman as Home Secretary is a bit like appointing Jeffrey Dahmer as the headmaster of Milwaukee's School for Boys with Tasty Hearts. But what do we need? Well, if you ask Suella, we need everyone to form an orderly line on the border and follow the safe and legal process of getting to the UK, and all will work smoothly. What better than to hear this process laid out plain and clear by the woman herself at the very same Select Committee hearing?
Well, we have... you're fleeing which country, sorry?
Any African country.
Any African country. Well...
Could be any continent, but let's say any African country. I don't want to name one because then their Prime Minister might have a go at me for demonising their population. So let's just theoretically talk about an African country which is going through a period of turbulence and which is persecuting its citizens, including an innocent 16-year-old like me.
Well, we have an asylum system, and people can put in applications for asylum.
How would I do that?
Well, you can do it through the safe and legal routes that we have. We have offered 390,000 places to people seeking safety from various countries around the world.
I'm not Syrian, I'm not Afghan, I'm not Ukrainian, not any of those specific schemes. The Dub scheme is historic. What scheme's open to me?
Well, if you are able to get to the UK, you are able to put in an application for asylum.
But I would only enter the UK illegally then, wouldn't I?
Well, that would, if you put in your application for asylum upon arrival, that would be the process that you enter.
How could I arrive in the UK if I didn't have permission to get onto an aircraft legally to arrive in the UK?
Now, I'm no expert or anything, but maybe the reason that so many people arrive here illegally to then claim asylum is because it's the only way to claim asylum for the overwhelming majority of those actually seeking. After complaints across party lines about the absolute shit show that is Manston, Suella seemed to finally clear whatever was holding the applications up. Within 3 weeks, all 4,000 migrants were moved to long-term accommodation, and Manston remains empty to this day. Despite calls from a few different organisations, there is currently no investigation into what happened here and why. Number 4. Rwanda. Okay, this one is probably the most famous one and the most malicious one. In an effort to discourage people from coming to the UK, Suella's predecessor Priti Patel's extensive knowledge and research on immigration control led her to just say, fuck it, let's deport them to Rwanda. You may have seen Suella's now famously unhinged speech about her dream of deporting asylum seekers there. The plan was announced on the 14th of April 2022, with the messaging from Priti Patel stating that anyone who enters into the UK via illegal and dangerous routes, such as using small boats across the channel, may be relocated to Rwanda to have their asylum claim processed there. The spirit of this is simple. We don't want poor foreigners coming here at all. This is why their comments about immigration are so pervasive. All they're saying is that they will deport people who take advantage of our hard-working taxpayers. Any reasonable person wants that. All you need to do is just apply through the legal route. It makes sense until you dig and realise that there simply isn't a safe and legal route for the overwhelming majority of those seeking asylum. Here's another problem. Firstly, the deterrent didn't deter anyone. In fact, we saw more asylum seekers being received into the UK in 2022 than any previous year on record. Also, we haven't sent a single person to Rwanda, and we've paid the Rwandan government £140 million so far for the scheme. Why haven't we sent anyone there yet, I hear you ask? Well, this pesky European Court of Human Rights stopped the plane from leaving because the people being deported hadn't actually exhausted all of their legal options for claiming asylum in the UK. It turns out it's super important to actually honour due legal process. Who knew? Apparently not Suella, a qualified barrister and former Attorney General. Now, secondly, you might be thinking, Geza, aren't you just being a bit racist? Maybe Rwanda is just a nice place to be. And look, you can think that. You'd be wrong, but you can totally think that. Understand that there has been a genocide of almost 1 million people there in my lifetime. According to organisations such as Freedom House and the Human Rights Watch, there is blatant political repression, sanctioned torture in government-owned safe houses. There's open disgust shown towards LGBT people by both the police and the public. Suspected assassinations of dissidents happen to this day, and election rigging is rife. Granted, apart from all of that, Rwandans are living the dream. On top of this total, complete shit show, Suella then stands up in front of MPs and has the fucking balls to say this.
The system is broken. Illegal migration is out of control, and too many people are more interested in playing political parlour games, covering up the truth, than solving the problem.
So, just to be clear, Suella owns the libs by blaming herself and her party. Whoa, wait, look, Suella got something right. So, with all of that being said, I think it's clear to any sane person that Suella Braverman isn't even qualified to talk about immigration policy down her local Weatherspoons with Les and Big Dave, never mind being Home fucking Secretary. And look, if you're not nearly as outraged as I am, fair enough. But ask yourself this. What is it you actually expect from your Home Secretary? If you were paying somebody over £135,000 a year, which you are, of course, to lead the country's immigration and asylum policy, would you at least expect them to know how the current immigration model works? Would it be fair to ask that they not be a totally sadistic and vitriolic arsehole while performing their governmental duty? Just food for thought. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. I will make more, I promise. Love you. Bye bye.